All right. So with that being said, we'll turn our attention to Brother Rich speaking on the world of the judges.
All right, good morning, brothers and sisters, young people. Great to see everyone. Thank you for your hospitality. Had a nice trip out here. Dan was waiting with his car when we came into O'Hare. It was beautiful. So, the world of the judges. There's a lot of information in the judges that we may be familiar with. But it's oftentimes very difficult to kind of figure out the judges if we don't know the background of that information, right? And so it's always very important to know the context of stories. And the story of the judges is a wonderful story, it really is. Perseverance, pressure, struggle. This small group of people that just were kind of hemmed in on every side, as we're going to see, by enemies. And it was a very difficult time for the children of Israel. Were they going to survive during this time? That's the big question. Was the children of Israel going to survive during this time? What was going on during this time that made everything so chaotic, so crazy? And then, the last thing that we're going to look at for this particular class is, we're going to see God's hand working in the lives of the children of Israel and using events of that time to bring about his purpose. And we're going to see, this is going to involve environmental issues. This is going to involve, chaos in other areas, destruction, famine, all these kind of things. These negative things are going to bring about a positive outcome for the children of Israel. I think that's an important lesson sometimes in our lives, right? We go through negative things in our lives, difficult times in our lives, and sometimes we can't see the good until we look back afterward and like, oh yeah, I understand what God was doing. But when we're going through it, right, it doesn't seem pleasant, Paul tells us. It's not good, not joyful, right? It's tough, it's difficult. And so we can just keep that in mind. So let's get into it. We're going to be looking at a lot of ancient world history. Hope you guys like history. We're going to be looking at some archaeology as well. And we're going to mix in, hopefully maybe some, words of exhortation, some lessons that we can learn from this time period. Okay? Ready? Let's do it. All right. So the world of the judges. We got to go back in time. All right, we're going to go back in time about 3,000, let's say 3,000 years ago. All right, everyone with me? We're in the time machine. We're going back. All right, we're going to set the stage for the time of the judges. Here we go. All right, so this is the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean. All right, this is, you can see, maybe you may be familiar with this. Can you still hear me? You can see Egypt, obviously, right here up top. You can see the Hittites. I'm not going to go through all of the different types of people and nations here, but it was considerable. There are a lot of different nations. The Greeks were there. Babylon, you can see all the way over to the right. Okay, so let's just keep this in mind. A lot of different countries, a lot of different nations, a lot of different peoples. Very advanced civilization during this time. As we're going to see, these people traded with each other, they moved, they had diplomatic relations with each other, a lot like we have today with different countries, okay? I found this particular map interesting just because it puts into perspective the trade and the interaction that was going on during this time. If you can just take a look, the Bronze Age trade. Why do they call it the Bronze Age? Anyone know? Venture a guess. Yeah, so they're going to use, bronze is going to be the major metal that they're going to use for any of their weapons, right? And also their farming implements as well. Bronze was the big metal. Who can tell me what two types of metal are used to form bronze? Anybody? Copper and tin. Excellent. All right. So copper and tin. Keep that in mind as well in the background of the back of your minds, because we're going to take a look at that. But look at all the trade that's going on, right? All the way from Sicily in Sardinia all the way to Israel, right? And then all the way out to Babylon. So massive amounts of trade is going on. And again, you can see kind of the different types of trade. You have glass there. You can, there's wine, there's olives. All of these things are being traded. Copper was a big thing as well. Tin, they needed this to make bronze. That was very important. Copper and tin, and particularly bronze. This is the best way to kind of think about it. It was like oil and gas today. And I know we're making a transition, right, to, away from fossil fuels, but just think about how much we rely on fossil fuels to make everything go. Bronze was the same way, okay? Very important. So again, the trade, the interaction, the diplomatic relationships that people have with each other, all right? Now, how do we know all this? Rich, what are you making this all up? Yeah, I mean, I guess I could, but I'm not. This is a shipwreck that they found off of the coast of modern-day Turkey, okay? What was modern-day Turkey referred to in Scripture? Asia Minor, right? Okay, very good. This is off of the coast of Turkey. This is a shipwreck. Everything that this ship was carrying, it sunk to the bottom. Look at how it sunk to the bottom, like it just went boop, right down. Everything that this was carried was still in this ship. And when they found this thing, it was like the ancient world opened up to them as far as what people were trading, what people thought was, precious and valuable, that type of thing. So let's just take a look at some of the things that the ancient world was trading in. What was valuable to them, okay? There was a huge cargo of different types of luxury items. So as we know, you may not know this. In the ancient world, and even today, right, you have like a top, say, 10% of the world that has the majority of the wealth, right? And then you had kind of everybody else. In the ancient world, it was even more pronounced. You maybe had like 5% of the population controlling the rest of the 95. You had 5% of the population controlling the economics of that. So they were, if Egypt, let's say Egypt had some linen that they wanted, right? They would trade that with somebody else. And so these kings love luxury, right? There's some correspondences between different types of kings about, the great clothes that they were wearing, that type of thing. So they love luxury items, just like we love luxury items today. 10 tons of copper and 1 ton of tin. Why do you think that's important? Say again? Yeah, the bronze mix, that's right, which is a 10-to-1 mix, which is interesting, right? It takes, it's a 10-to-1, copper with tin. So it's a 10-to-1 mix. And you mix these things, and you come up with bronze. There was glass, ivory, Canaanite jars filled with olives, resin, glass beads, all right? Logs from Africa. That's pretty interesting. Remember Solomon, right? Solomon had a fleet of ships with the Phoenicians, and he traveled, his fleet went everywhere as well. So, Solomon understood, the importance of economic trade. Hippopotamus teeth, ooh, right? Ivory, okay. So they're going to use the tusks, right? Of and make different things. Very important. Ostrich eggshells. It's interesting. Okay. I wonder what they would do with that. Bronze and copper jewelry, that makes sense. Gold, silver, of course. Weapons of all kinds, food of all kinds. All right, so this ship was loaded with, I think it was 40 tons of stuff. And this is kind of all of the things that they were trading. And this was I think it happened in the late 80s that they found this thing, and it was a massive story, particularly with all the ancient world nerds out there. So, all right. Here are some examples. They actually took this out of the ship, right? Brought it up. It's in a museum right now. You can see the different swords that they have. Look at the craftsmanship over on the right-hand side, right? Look at the beads there and everything. This took some time. It took some skill, and so I just found this just really fascinating stuff. The weapons right there. A lot of the different weapons were made out of bronze. Okay, yes.
It's possible. just can't recognize it for some reason.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe, they could make a bowl out of it, a decorative bowl or something. They could engrave it with something. I'm not sure.
I sure hope so.
Yeah. Let's do a little research on that. What do they use ostriches for? All right. Very good. All right, so let's take a look at some of the major people of this time period. The Hittites, very powerful group of people located in modern Turkey. All right. Hattusha was their capital. You can actually look at some of the ruins. You can go to these places and check out the whole city of Hattusha. These are the lion gates right there. You can see, just massive stones kind of walking up. And we'll take a look at a recreation of Hattusha just to kind of give you a flavor for what we're dealing with. They were rivals of the Mycenaeans, okay? The Greeks. They fought over control of the Aegean Sea and the trade. This is where we get our story from Homer about Troy, the Iliad and the Odyssey, right? This all came out of this time period of fighting. Troy was Troy actually existed. We know where it was, and it was a major trading area, and they wanted control of that. Anyways, they fought Egypt as well. They fought Egypt for control of Canaan. Who was in Canaan at this time? Interesting. All right. The Hittites are going to completely disappear from history during the Bronze Age collapse. Oh, the Bronze Age collapse. That's pretty important. I never knew about the Bronze Age collapse until like 5 years ago. I never even knew it existed. And this is what kind of prompted me to kind of do some more research and how it related to the story in the Bible of the Judges, and we'll make some connections with that. Hittites are gone after the collapse in the Bronze Age, and we're going to look in detail at this collapse, like what happened, and the ramifications of this collapse for the children of Israel, the Hebrews that were in the land. Okay? All right. All right, here's a recreation of Hattusha. You can see the massive city walls there. And you can see this was a very popular design for cities during this time. You had the lower city where all of the kind of the peasants, the everyday people, and then as you got higher up, you can see that there is a structure up there which was the temple, along with all of the government buildings, and they were in the upper city. Okay, so there was definitely social class system, and so everything in the upper city was, we're getting serious now. This is where all the wealthy people live. This is where all the power in the city was. The lower city, not so much. And so, you're going to have all of these types of different cities. Very fortified. They're obviously fortified because war was a major. Every spring, the kings would go out to war. Okay, and that's actually mentioned in Scripture, too, about David. It was the time of war, and he went out, Ramah, I think. He was going to go and fight Ramah, and this is when, the whole incident with Bathsheba and everything took place. Okay, so there was actually time period, a very short time period where war is going to happen in the ancient world. They just didn't have the logistics to, to have all of these battles constantly. They just didn't have it. All right, the Mycenaeans, we talked about that. Over to the right, that is a gold death mask that was found in the ruins of Mycenae. It is called anyone know what that is? It is called the Mask of Agamemnon. It's pretty good. Agamemnon was one, he was in the Iliad, in the Iliad he's mentioned, right? He was like one of the main Greek guys that wanted to go and get Troy, okay, with Helen and all the whole thing. All right. The Minoans lived on the island of Crete. They were conquered by the Mycenaeans, a warrior culture. Everything was based upon war. Everything was based upon battles. These were a warlike people, but they were also interested in trade. They were also interested in luxury goods. They were also interested in protecting themselves. Okay, so all of these things are going to have an impact. We talked about this. They fought the Hittites for control of the Aegean Sea and the routes into the Black Sea. Right, you have the Dardanelles and the Bosporus, this little narrow strip of, it's almost like a river that went up into the Black Sea. This is where Constantinople is going to be, right there. So very, very important. They had good relations with Egypt. They traded back and forth. They sent letters. The kings would send letters back and forth. they would call each other brother, right? Like, hey, we're all one big family, right? Kind of like Europe with Queen Victoria's kids and everything, right? They were all related to each other in some way. You know, you give your daughter to a king, you know, to make kind of, you know, relationships strong, diplomatic and family relationships. They did that a lot. We know from Scripture that happened, right? In fact, we read about this in the summertime. Athaliah, right? She married one of the Judean kings. Athaliah was the daughter of Jezebel and Ahab, right? And so that marriage was supposed to bring Israel together. You know, all the Hebrews are, yay, we're all one big happy family. We know the outcome of that. It wasn't great. And so they're going to, again, the Mycenaeans, when the Bronze Age collapse happens, Mycenaeans are gone for whatever reason. And we'll look at some of the reasons why it's going to happen, right? They are lost to history. So we have two major powers now, brothers and sisters, in the ancient world during this time, the time of the Judges, that because of this collapse, gone. Hittites are gone, the Mycenaeans are gone from history. All right? Let's keep that in mind. This was no joke. This collapse that I keep talking about was a major catastrophe for the ancient world, and we'll take a look at that. And we're going to find out that this collapse, like we already talked about, is actually going to open up the door for this little ragtag group of people that were living in the hills of Canaan to kind of open up the door to maybe expand a little bit. Okay? All right. Here's Mycenaean. This is an artist's recreation. You can see that round pit right there towards the front and the center. It was a burial area. This is where they found a lot of the gold and the mass and stuff like that. Up top, again, you have a lower city. You have an upper city, or the upper part of the city. Again, this is where all the rich people, powerful people lived up in the upper city. The lower city was down below. Again, this is a place that if you wish, you can go and visit. You can walk through the different gates and stuff like that. So on the bucket list. All right. Last one that we're going to look at as far as people and nations are concerned is Egypt. Egypt is going to play a major role in our story, in the story of the Judges, even though, is Egypt mentioned a lot in the Judges? No, it's really no, which is weird. We're going to find out why, Egypt's not mentioned. But they controlled Canaan during this time. Interesting. Superpower of the day. Egypt was the bad boys on the block. They controlled all of the Nile, Upper and Lower Egypt. Massive amounts of agricultural wealth was produced by Egypt. We think about the Midwest as the breadbasket of the nation, breadbasket of the world, really. Think about Egypt like that. They had, because of where they were located and because of the Nile River, they actually had 2 harvests. Think about that. So they could plant their wheat or their crops and have 1 harvest, and then they could replant again and have 2 harvests. While other people up in the higher, up in the northern climates, they couldn't do that. And so Egypt is going to really produce almost double the amount of food of everybody else because of the Nile River. And we know, we read about in Genesis, right, with Joseph. Think about, the 7 years of plenty, the 7 years of famine, and how that all plays in. Okay? It conquered and controlled Canaan, and we'll take a look at a map of that. They had a very stable civilization, and they had a stable civilization for thousands of years for 2 reasons. Number one, what's on both sides of the Nile River? Desert, right? Not real easy to go across a desert and attack Egypt. Did it happen? Of course it did. We're going to find out that it did. But did it happen on a regular basis? It did not. So they were stable. It was a stable civilization. And so if you are stable for thousands of years, think about that. You have a culture and a country that is stable for thousands of years. You're going to have a different outlook on things. Okay? The Egyptians, in a lot of ways, just wanted to be left alone. Like, hey, we'll trade with you. You want to come and see us? That's great. But they were really concerned about their own safety primarily. And that's one of the reasons why they invaded Canaan. And Canaan is going to be a buffer zone for the Egyptians against the Hittites. All right? They traded with everyone. Egypt is going to be one of the only civilizations in this area that is going to survive this Bronze Age collapse. The BAC. How about that? The BAC. They were severely weakened. And this weakening of Egypt, this retraction of the power of Egypt down into Egypt itself, away from Canaan, it's going to open up the door to a lot of different types of people to come into this land. One of which was the Israelites, right? The Hebrews are going to come out of Egypt during this time. It's really fascinating how this all, this is the time period that Israel really is going to be, they're going to be in the land, they're going to be struggling for survival, that type of thing. Okay? All right. Canaan. Now we're getting into the area that we're talking about here. You can see all of the types of different people that lived in Canaan. The Bible tells us that, right? All kinds of different types of people lived in different types of areas of Canaan. It's going to be controlled by Egypt, as we said. It was filled with small nations, little like city-states types of things, where you had one city, and then around the city you had people living there, and that they were kind of their own government, and they did their own thing. So you had different types of people. The Philistines, right? We're going to look at them in some pretty major detail just because of the interactions. Like the Philistines. Would you say the Philistines probably were the number one enemy of Israel during the time of the Judges? Yeah, absolutely, Rich. Yeah, definitely, totally agree with you 100%. All right. You have the Jebusites as well, the Amorites, Moab, Edom, Amalek, all right, which was genetically, Esau, Jacob and Esau, they were related to each other. So the Hebrews are going to be related, right? Edom, they related to them. Moab, definitely related. And Amalek, right? So that's a family. Think about that. When we see the Moabites, the Edomites, Amalek, the Amalekites, right? God has some pretty harsh words when it comes to the Amalekites, right? I will never forget what Amalek did, right? I will always be at war, God says, with Amalek. And there were a couple different reasons. We know that Amalek, they attacked the weak. When they were coming out of Egypt, they attacked the weak, the old, the young that couldn't, keep up with the rest, and they attacked them. And that was so offensive to God that they would attack the weak. This is one of the tenets of Scripture, right? We're not supposed to attack the weak. We're not supposed to take advantage of someone that is weaker than us. We're supposed to lift them up. We're supposed to strengthen them. It's the very opposite of what the Amalekites were doing to Israel. All right? And so that's one of the reasons why. But these are... They're all genetically, they're a family. They're genetically similar, okay? All from Abraham. And so this whole area is going to be chaotic during the BAC, right? Late Bronze Age collapse, all right? Questions, comments before we move on? Good. Maybe not. The blank stares. Yeah, Mr. Deneen, we got it all. We got it all. All right, finally, we're getting to this Bronze Age collapse situation. All right. The Bronze Age collapse, it was a very violent, very sudden, and it was like a complete disaster to everyone that was living in and around the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, this is the area that we're talking about. As we've already talked about, the Hittites were destroyed, the Mycenaeans were destroyed. There's a time period in Greek history, which is called the Dark Ages. The Greeks lost the ability to write. Think about how chaotic a civilization has to be when you lose the ability to write, right? All of the scribes that did all the writing, they were killed off or whatever. They died for whatever reason. And the Greeks lost the ability to write things down for a period of time. I think it was like 300-400 years. People in Greece lost the ability to write. Think about that. All right. Egypt, as we talked about, they're going to survive, but they're going to be very weakened. In fact, Egypt, from this time period on, so from the time period of the Judges, right, all the way to the time when they were conquered from Babylon, Egypt is up here, right? Is a slow decline of Egypt. Egypt is not going to get stronger and stronger. They're actually going to get weaker and weaker and weaker. And, they're going to be conquered by the Babylonians. Nebuchadnezzar is going to go down. The Assyrians came down, took some portions of that. And then eventually the whole country is going to be taken over by the Persians and then eventually Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great thought he was a god. He was Amun-Ra, and he went down. He had there's a whole story with that. Canaan is going to be in chaos because the country that is controlling Canaan is withdrawing. They don't have the resources to continue to have forts there. The Egyptians had forts in the land of Canaan, areas where they would pay taxes. They had places where they kept soldiers, that type of thing. The Egyptians were a major part of Canaan during this time. But once the collapse happens, they withdraw. And now it's like the Wild West in Canaan during this time. There's no one big power that is kind of keeping control of everybody. Trade and communication is going to really, come to a standstill. It's going to just kind of, you're not going to have the trading that you had before. Migrations of people. Does the Bible talk about a major migration of people from one area to the other? I think it's in Exodus, if I remember. All right, the migration of the Hebrews out of Egypt is all happening during this time, brothers and sisters. Okay? History doesn't happen in a vacuum. The Bible doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in real time with real people and real events. Okay? And this is why it's so important to know the background, particularly, historical background, cultural, archaeology, that kind of thing. And so we can get a full picture of what God wants us to know in the book of Judges. What are the lessons? I think we're starting to see that maybe there's some other lessons that we can gain from this. We'll look at that as we go on. Major migration of people. Civilization took decades to reorganize and to recover. Okay? Which really, brothers and sisters, is going to give the Israelites time in the land of Canaan to kind of establish themselves. Well, how are they going to establish themselves? Well, one of the first king of Israel is Saul, as we know, and then David. David is going to coalesce everything a little bit more. Solomon is really going to coalesce everything. In fact, the Israelites are going to control the land of Canaan. It's not Egypt anymore. It's Israel. The Hebrews? Bunch of slaves that we kicked out, right? This is the mindset of the Egyptians, right? They're controlling Canaan now? But this opened the door for Israel to come in. All right? So what was this collapse? It was the worst disaster in ancient history. Within a period of 40 to 50 years, at the end of the 13th and beginning of the 12th century, almost every significant city in the Eastern Mediterranean world was destroyed. Many of them lost to history, right? Well, why did this happen? Let's just think about this. A collapse of civilization. The United States collapses. Far-fetched? And this time, who knows? All of the great powers right now, what would happen if it all collapsed, right? The underpinnings of civilization, what if they were taken away, like our infrastructure in the United States, the logistical kind of things, all of the trucking that happens, all of the trains that are used, the flights back and forth nonstop. What if that all stopped? What if the educational system in the United States just stopped? No one goes to school anymore. No one is learning any new material. People that had the knowledge are gone. They were killed, taken prisoner, made a slave, okay? Just imagine, what would we do? What would happen? I mean, it would be absolute chaos. Some people would survive better than others, but this was a very difficult time for the individual, say Egyptian, the individual Hittite, right? It was just a very chaotic, very brutal time. And so, not great. So the question is, what caused this? Well, there's a lot of different theories. We'll take a look at some of them. So time period that we're talking about here, this is pretty important, 1200 to 1150 BC, okay? And so right around this time, this massive cataclysmic event is going to take place. And it's going to help Israel out. So what caused this Bronze Age collapse? Well, during this time, there was environmental stresses. There was a massive volcano up in Iceland during this time. Ba-boom! That massive explosion is going to put particles up into the air, and it's going to block out some of the sunlight, okay? You're not going to get the amount of sunlight now, which is going to affect crops, particularly in the southern, in Europe, particularly southern Europe, okay? So because of that volcano, because of all of the pollution in the air, it was a massive explosion. It's going to cause famine. There's going to be drought. There's going to be a change in the weather patterns during this time. And so areas that got a lot of rain, not going to get any rain now. And so the dependence upon rain for crops is going to kind of rear its ugly head right now, right? Because if you don't have rain, your crops can't grow. You have no crops, you have no food. You have no food, you starve. Got a couple options, right? You can sit down and just kind of starve to death, or you can say, you know what, I'm going to take my family, I'm going to go someplace else. I have a ship, there's a ship right here, let's maybe jump into the ship, maybe walk a little bit. We got to find food, like, you know, we can't continue, we're going to die. They deforested a lot of forests, right? In order to kind of open up the area for land. Deforestation. That's how you say it, sure. Over farming in areas, you know, taking all the nutrients out of the ground. So the crops that they were growing, the yield is small. So those are environmental factors. That's going to cause people to move, to travel to other places that have food. Let's just keep it in the back of your mind. What place in the ancient world had 2 harvests? We just talked about this. They might have some food, maybe some grain that was stored or something. I don't know, possibly. So they're gonna hey, we trade with Egypt all the time. They have food, they're stable. Maybe we should go there. Okay, we have options. We're gonna die here. All right. This is very interesting, brothers and sisters. The use of iron weapons. During the Bronze Age, you had 2 metals that you had to mine, and then there's a whole process, a manufacturing process that takes place in order to turn these metals, combine these 2 metals into a composite, and then make a weapon from it. With iron, you're just mining one, right? You're just mining one metal, number one, and number 2, the process becomes a lot easier. You can mass produce iron weapons at a very rapid pace compared to bronze weapons, okay? It's less of a process. So now you can mass produce swords. You can mass produce spears. And, now you have, you got a couple thousand guys with some spears or something like that. Now you can do some damage to maybe a village or a town. You can take it over, that type of thing. There's a tremendous amount of political infighting during this time. All right, and then lastly, mass migration of people coming from the west of the Mediterranean to the east. So it's a migration from west to east. And there's a certain group of people that we talked about that are going to be in the east. And now, you have the Israelites in Egypt, leaving Egypt, coming into the land of Canaan. You got these characters, the sea peoples, don't know. They're coming as well, and they're going to meet right in Canaan. All right. So here's a quick map right here of different types of invasions. You can see all the different fires. Right, there are all the cities that were destroyed during this time. Just take a second to take a look at all of the cities that were destroyed. Right. Look at all the way up and down, gone. Knossos. Here, right? That was a major. You actually go to the ruins of the palace at Knossos. All right, so mass migration of people from the west to the east, looking for food, looking for stability. Okay, so this is the time period, brothers and sisters, of the Judges. This is the time period that we're talking about. It was a time of upheaval, chaos, violence, death. It was not a peaceful time, all right? The whole coast of Canaan is going to be wiped out by these invaders, these sea peoples, these people that are migrating from the west to the east, and they have these new types of weapons, these iron weapons. Woo. All right, everybody has them. You know, a lot of times the bronze weapons that we have, they were just for the elite. All right, the peasants, they wouldn't be given bronze weapons. Now everyone can have an iron weapon, easy peasy, no problem. The whole Canaan has been wiped out on invaders, and now Israel is actually going to deal with these sea peoples as we're going to see, but Israel is going to be pushed into the hill country of Israel. You know, when we talk about Ephraim, right, that's all the hill country. When we talk about Judah, the tribe of Judah, that's the hill country. And so the Israelites, because they didn't follow God's command, right, in Joshua and Judges, look, you got to get rid of these people. You need to survive. You can't be dealing with all of these different types of people. You're going to lose your identity. You're going to lose your culture, your religious beliefs. And this was really what God was concerned about as he brings his people out of one location of Egypt where they were being pressured. Right? Imagine staying in Egypt for 200 years, right? I get the sense, brothers and sisters, that the Hebrews, the Israelites went down into Egypt. I think they really forgot about who Yahweh was, because Moses had to tell them, right? Who sent you? And he had to explain to them who God was. They were losing their identity in Egypt. And so now the opportunity comes to go into the land of promise, of milk and honey. And what happens? Well, they get hemmed in up into the mountains and into the hill country. They're not strong enough. Remember what Judges talks about? It says that Israel took control of the hill country, but they couldn't take the land down in the plains. Why? Chariots of iron, right? Well, who's bringing all of these chariots of iron? Well, different types of people are there, particularly these sea peoples. They're bringing this new technology into the land of Canaan. All right? And so it's actually setting up. God set it up for the children of Israel perfectly. Because Egypt withdrew from the land of Canaan. Now Canaan is wide open. There's a few people here and there. But now Israel can come in and just possess those villages, right? Because there was such a depopulation at this time because of the Bronze Age collapse. This is like paradise. We got houses here. Look at this city. We can just go in. Maybe we have to fix a few things, but it's perfect. Vineyards are all set up. Look at the fields, everything. All you have to do is just go in and take it. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. They were slack, as it says. Joshua says, why are you so slack? I love that word. Why are you so slack to go up and possess the land? Even during Joshua's time, right? The people are like, oh man, we've been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. We're finally in this beautiful area. You know what? I'm done fighting. I got my land, right? So all of these things are going to impact the story of the children of Israel as they come into the land of promise. So Israel just had to finish the job. Canaan was depopulated. Egypt wasn't around to tell them, hey, you got to knock it off. They came in and they could have done their own thing, but they didn't. And so Joshua to Israel, as we talked about, continue the work. You have to continue. We have to, this area has to be for us. We can't have any other pressures. Now let's take a look at Joshua 18 very quickly. Yeah, I just referenced this, right? And the whole congregation in verse 1 of the children of Israel assembled together at Shiloh and set up the tabernacle of the congregation there. Just make a little note in the back of your mind about that. We're going to take a look at this Shiloh, right? They set up the congregation in Shiloh, all right? And it's going to remain there for a long period of time. Verse 3, and Joshua said unto the children of Israel, verse 2, and there remained among the children of Israel 7 tribes, which had not yet received their inheritance. So 5 had received their inheritance, 7. So, less than half of the people. Joshua said unto the children of Israel, how long are ye slack to go to possess the land which the Lord God of your fathers hath given you? And so, they were to go out. Joshua gives them the command, and it just doesn't happen for a lot of different reasons, right? It was a lot easier just to take your inheritance. That's it. Thanks a lot. Okay? As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Remember they pleading to Joshua's like, listen, you gotta, serve the Lord. And what it says, what Joshua says is, as long as Joshua and the elders that outlived Joshua were around, the children of Israel followed after God. They followed after Yahweh. They participated in the ritual worship at the tabernacle in Shiloh. But once that generation was gone, they turned away from those types of things. Okay? There were other pressures, other influences in the land of Canaan that is slowly going to draw the children of Israel away from God. They're going to be assimilated by the other, really they should have been assimilating everybody else, but in a lot of ways they were assimilated into the culture of the Canaanites. All right, for good and bad. Good, one thing that they took, and they kind of made their own thing. They took the alphabet, right, from the Phoenicians. They took that and they made their own alphabet. All right, we know this, the cycle of misery. I like that, the cycle of misery, right? Disobedience, bondage, misery, liberation and rest, compromises, over and over again, right? It really, it can be a microcosm of our lives, can't it, brothers and sisters, sometimes, right? Disobedience, right? We're not doing the right thing. We're doing things that we want. We're being, drawn away, host of different things. Things happen. We make bad decisions, consequences. Then you're just in misery, right? Liberation and rest, and then the compromises. And this is what's going to happen. We're not going to take a look at everything that the Judges talks about, because there's a lot of judges that I just mentioned, like he ruled for judged Israel for 15 years, and that's all we know about them. And there's others that we know quite a bit that we'll take a look at. So just keep this in mind, the cycle of misery. Cycle of misery. Okay. We'll finish this up real quick here. Israel is going to conquer the central hill country of Canaan, right in the middle. It's actually where modern day, the West Bank is today. The West Bank, that area. All right. A lot of the ancient homeland of Israel is actually controlled by the Palestinian Authority right now. Okay, and this is why we do have a lot of more kind of belligerent, I would say, like the Jewish settlers are going out there and they're starting their own settlements here. It's like, this is our land, right? This is a land that God has given us, and so there's quite a bit of friction in some of these areas about obviously who controls the land. Anyways, for many different reasons, Israel is not going to be able to drive them out. Mostly because of the lack of faith. They stopped trusting in God. But, they rapidly, and this is key here, brothers and sisters, rapidly began to lose their national identity. All right? They began to lose their own unique identity. What did it mean to be children of Israel? What did it mean to be a Hebrew? What did it mean to be Yahweh's people? They were losing this identity. And, they could have been lost to history if it wasn't for God, all right? Because oftentimes, a group of people comes from another area, they just assimilate. This is actually what the Sea Peoples are going to do along the coastline of Canaan. They're going to come in, they're going to assimilate all these other people. A few families are going to remain faithful to God. One that comes to mind, Caleb, right? Caleb and his family are going to be faithful. There were others. And so the tribe of Judah is going to be very aggressive in conquering land. They're going to be successful in some areas. They're going to be pushed back in a few. Like one of the people, obviously, we're going to look at next class is the Philistines. Okay, they are going to be one of these sea peoples that are going to come, most likely from Sicily and Sardinia. Right? They're going to come and move east and take over. So the Philistines, brothers and sisters, are not native to the land of Canaan. Think about that. They're not native to it. They came from another location and set themselves up along the coastline of what is modern day Israel. Well, it's probably Gaza right now, but anyways. All right, and we don't have to turn to it, but in Judges 1 through 3 it kind of sets all this up. In fact, an angel of the Lord is going to come. We should probably take a look at that. In Judges, let's see. In chapter 2, verse 1, and an angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I made you to go up out of Egypt and have brought you into the land which I swear unto your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and ye shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land. Ye shall throw down their altars, but you have not obeyed my voice. Why have ye done this? Right? And so God is saying, what's the deal? I brought you up out of Egypt into this land. Look at this land. It's what you've been longing for. I've given you the land of milk and honey. And what have they done? Nothing. They did the exact opposite of what God wanted them to do, unfortunately. Okay? And you know what, brothers and sisters? Sometimes we can be hard on the children of Israel. Right? Like, why, you should have done this. But it's hindsight is 20/20. We can make all of the judgments we want. But when you're in the mix, when you're in the middle of all of this chaos, right? And I'm not making excuses for them, but it was a very difficult time. But I'm guessing that some of them did see that, the suffering that they were going through at that time eventually would bring about redemption, right? As it had. But you can imagine, someone just kind of going through this, trying to hide, hiding your food. You have bands of robbers coming into your land, taking your family away. Maybe they, take your children away from you. They're enslaved. These are things that we are so far removed from. We can't even enter into that type of misery, that type of desperation, that type of sadness, right? One thing that kind of pops into my mind is in Jeremiah when it talks about Rachel weeping for her children, right? And these were the mothers that were crying as they saw their children taken away to Babylon as slaves. It was in Ramah, right? It was kind of the center point where the Babylonians took all of the booty that they had and they divided it up. And so that's why Jeremiah talks about, in Ramah there was a voice heard, Rachel weeping for her children. And so that's what it was these women saw their families taken away from them. And I think that's why in Matthew that quote is used, in talking about the killing of the innocents in and around Bethlehem when Jesus was born by Herod. It was the same type of weeping. The children were taken away from them. So, all right, chariots of iron. We talked about this already. Super weapon of the ancient world, lightweight and fast. They could be pulled. There was 2 guys in there, one to drive, one to fight. So these were very effective. Israel had no military answer to this weapon. They had none. They didn't have any chariots at all. In fact, they didn't even use horses, right? They weren't to multiply horses. It's interesting, brothers and sisters, that what does Solomon do when he becomes king? Yeah, he starts multiplying horses. He had chariots as well. So he got into the game relatively quickly. All right? Just cause bad, just imagine, you're some guy and you're standing there with a spear and 10 horses come flying at you with guys with bows and everything. You're obviously just going to take off. I mean, I would. That's ridiculous. All right. I'm out. And then here you go. This is kind of a good visual, right? The green is all the area that wasn't conquered. What? The red is the area that was conquered. So you can see the flat plain areas on the coast were not conquered. But in the hill country where iron chariots are not effective, right? You can't bring a chariot up into the hills, right? It's not going to be effective. So this is why Israel was able to control the hill country. They were hill fighters, right? They did a lot of kind of hit and run tactics, that type of thing. Very rarely is Israel going to line up and face you know, a massive army with chariots and stuff like that. They're going to use hit and run tactics on them, as we're going to see as we go on here. So they're hemmed in, brothers and sisters. They have no access to the sea. They have strong enemies all around them with these super weapons, with these chariots of iron. And it's a very dismal time for Israel. And this is kind of the background that we're talking about. Here's Israel in the land. It wasn't easy, brothers and sisters. They were faced with a lot of temptation. They were faced with a lot of difficulty. And they're controlling now the hill country, but really the best land for cultivation is right along the coastline, right? It's kind of hard to farm in the hill country, right? But Israel's going to do it, actually. They're going to build vineyards, right, they're going to make terraces in the hill country, and they're going to grow grapes as well. They're going to make some really good wine and olive oil. And those two things are going to be like the bread and butter of the economy in this area for Israel, okay? Wheat, not so much, because wheat is, you know, needs kind of a flat surface. They did grow barley, though. Barley was actually a hardier plant than wheat, and they could grow that. And so, you know, like for instance, do you remember when Midian came in and you know, Gideon went down and they heard this guy telling the dream, and the dream was a loaf of barley bread came rolling into something along those lines. But there was a reason why barley is used. Barley was like the main crop for Israel during this time. It wasn't wheat. It was barley, all right? And barley, again, wasn't as, was a lot hardier than wheat. I just nerded out there. I'm sorry. Origins of the Philistines. We are stopping here. I appreciate your attention. Let's take a break, and then we'll get into the origin of the Philistines. Thank you.